Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast with Benji Naesen, brought to you by L'Ecole. We're going to be getting into Giro Stage 2 first, then Liege Bastogne Liege Men and Women. We'll put timestamps in the show notes and in the YouTube video description if you want to check that out and go to whichever you want. But starting with the Giro, which was a great stage. As you know, our Giro podcasts are brought to you by L'Ecole, our show partner. L'Ecole produce performance cycling apparel with a focus solely on road performance and making you go faster. They are the official kit supplier or apparel supplier to Bahrain McLaren. Bahrain McLaren, by the way, with Mark Perun, the Ukrainian, we forgot to call him out as a potential stage winner in this Giro d'Italia in our preview show. That was remiss of us. And unlike a lot of other brands, L'Ecole focus solely on road. They don't produce gravel clothing, some random shorts for you to wear on your gravel rides. It's all about road performance and road kit and making sure they're the best possible, and that's what they devote their energy and time to. If you want to check their kit out, you can find them at www.lecole.cc. That's LECOL.cc. But Giro d'Italia Stage 2 from Alcamo to Agrigento, I believe one of the recent finishes in Agrigento in 2008 was, or 2006 was when Rico finished ahead of, I think, Joaquim Rodriguez and Danilo De Luca. But a bit of a different racing era back then. Today, it was a similar finish, though. Four climbs at the start in this 149-kilometre stage, and then they weren't that serious, 4%, 4Ks at 3%, etc. Then pretty much rolling flat. Nothing that would cause anyone or any sprinters any issues. An intermediate sprint, 46 Ks in, then a second intermediate sprint, 138 Ks in, and then I think it's like a 3.7K, 5.2% climb up to Agrigento, and it's undulating. Some parts were actually were definitely steeper than others. It wasn't 5% the whole way. I think the names we put out as potential stage winners yesterday were Matthews, Ulissi, maybe even Peter Sagan normally if he was on his usual form. I think I mentioned yesterday. But yeah, Ulissi and Matthews, particularly Matthews, we thought was going to win today, or maybe Joao Almeida. But a break did try and form, Benji. Who was in that break, and was it allowed to go up the road, or did a team actually take ownership of this stage?
We had a 5-man breakaway. It included mainly Thomas de Gent, who launched the attack and spent most of his watts creating that breakaway. The others were kind of following. It was like the Thomas de Gent train that pretty much left the station, or the peloton in that case. The likes of Ben Gastauer, Mattia Bais from Androni, I think. Tonelli was there as well. So not the strongest breakaway outside of the Gent. So it became very clear that every KOM point and intermediate sprint they passed, that the Gent was taking them, and he wanted every single one of them. And the thing about the Gent is he always wants to win the gates. And it's not always necessarily because the points are useful. For KOM, he probably does want to go for it, but in regards to the points classification, he doesn't care about it. He cares about the money, because de Gent is the kind of rider that wants to try and take everything he can throughout the parcours to make his team, well, happy about him also, but also in general, he's kind of a hoarding person in the sense that whenever he wins a jersey or something, he's got a grandiose collection of those, and he fights for every single jersey he can to add on to that collection. So, special rider in that sense. A lot of riders would say, I'm not going to take this intermediate sprint to try and save some energy for the KOM point afterwards. Nah, the Gent is different. Anyway, despite that breakaway, having the Gent, it did not actually look to be succeeding too often. We honestly didn't really have a danger in there, and they were caught pretty close to the finish line, though, with about 20-ish kilometers to go. But in the meanwhile, a lot of stuff happened. We had an intermediate sprint where, well, it looked like it was quite hilly towards that intermediate sprint. So I was thinking that riders like Matthews and such could really be better there compared to a Gaviria, a Viviani, Demar as well. But the sprint kind of ended differently, because we had the Gent taking up the points in front. That means that only 3 points were left, 3, 2, and 1 point for the peloton. So not totally worth it to always go for it, but they did sprint for it, and it was just behind the corner. So Gaviria slides into the corner fast, Demar in his wheel, and Viviani in third-ish wheels, 2.5 wheel. He was like next to the Mar, but he slipped and he fell onto the ground, and luckily he was the only one that crashed, but unfortunately he did crash. And Gaviria ended up taking those points while we didn't really see it in the first place because the camera decided to go towards the breakaway the moment they hit the intermediate sprint, which is, unfortunate. Nonetheless, we had the Mar coming second on that one, so they were taking the 3 points and the 2 points, and Viviani looked to be, well, we weren't sure whether it was Viviani or not, but a minute later, someone crashed at the back of the peloton, and it was his teammate Consani, so it was pretty clear that both of them had crashed at that point, so Goffin is not looking so good in this stage with crashes all over. Now that was basically it for the intermediate sprint and the setup, but there was one rider that was always off the back. Also at that intermediate sprint, he was off the back, and it's a rider that's really important for GC and for the youth jersey. Alexander Vlasov, the hope for Astana next to Fulsang, and he actually ended up abandoning very unexpectedly. He went to the back and just stopped at an intersection where the car of Astana was parked, and he bent over for like quite a bit because it looked like he needed to puke or something, so it's probably an illness or something. Hopefully it's not anything related to the 3 COVID patients they had last week, but it's very coincidental that it's at Astana, so let's hope that's not the case. But yeah, a magical loss, a huge loss for this Giro d'Italia. Magical is a weird word to use, but a very important rider for youth and GC. Honestly, I'm quite sad.
Yeah, it's a real shame because I was so excited to see what Vlasov could do in this Grand Tour. I had him as really making a name for himself in this Giro. I thought some of the stages really suited him and his style of rider. He obviously won Baby Giro a few years ago, and this is the next step for him. He looked really good both before lockdown at Provence and after at Emilia, Lombardia, etc. And yeah, just a real shame that he is sick. And yeah, as Benji mentioned, I think there's been, I think 2 of the riders that Astana was supposed to have at this Giro had to pull out because of something related to COVID. I can't remember whether they were confirmed cases or not. I don't think so. It was more just a precaution. And yeah, I don't know what Vlasov is sick with, whether it's food poisoning or whatever. Apparently, he said he felt sick last night. He still did a good TT yesterday. His time in the TT, given the time he went with the wind conditions, I think was a time that was of someone who wasn't sick. Because even if he was 2-3% worse or under the weather, I wouldn't be expecting him to do that time. Only 57 seconds back with unfavourable wind conditions. So, back on Thomas, that is. So, yeah, it's a real shame. I wanted to see how Astana would use their 2 weapons against Thomas. They now only have Fulsang, who's probably not a better climber, really, than Thomas in the big mountains. So, when is Fulsang going to gain time on Thomas without having Lopez or Vlasov to attack him? Now, they've lost their second best rider, who we thought was going to be their main GC guy on day 2, and they lost a guy that was on the podium in the Tour de France on GC before the last main stage and stage 20 and won maybe the hardest stage. So on day 1, Miguel Angel Lopez. So not a good start for Astana at this year's Giro. Real shame for them. Shame for Fulsang, but it's not over yet. But not, yeah, he'd be thinking, oh, wow, what if I'd been at Liege Bastogne Liege today? But I guess I still think he can do a good result here. It's not the end of the world. But yeah, it was not that exciting a stage for the middle section. The break, it seemed to me like the teams chasing were very happy to have them mop up the bonification seconds. Could you remind everyone, Benji, how that works with the intermediate sprints? Because I need reminding almost every stage. And I think some of the riders do, how the intermediate sprints work at the Giro with points and bonus seconds.
So every single one of the intermediate sprints gives 10, 9, 8, blah, blah, blah points. So that's what they give when it comes to points. 10 points max for Ciclamino, indeed. And additionally, the second intermediate sprint in a stage gives 3, 2, and 1 seconds to the first 3 riders. Now, if I have to be really honest, I don't actually know who won the last intermediate sprint because I was not really... Well,
I think it was the
that race then. Yeah, it was breakaway indeed. You're correct. De Gent took it, and I think it's ahead of Gastauer and then Van Empel. So wasn't really mattering for GC anyway. So this stage it didn't really come out, but maybe in one of the next stages that intermediate sprint might be useful for, I don't know, a GC rider that wants to get a second or something, which, might not be worth the effort, to be honest. It depends on the stage.
Yeah, I think the teams chasing the GC teams were happy to let the breakaway take those bonus seconds. Otherwise, you've got to, I guess, worry about is another GC rider going to take those seconds just before the final climb. But yeah, it's not a bad idea for Thomas de Gent to mop up those seconds where possible. Maybe Etna probably too hard tomorrow, so it won't matter. But yeah, I guess he's a man that if there's money on the line, why not take it? I'd pretty much think the same way. It was Ineos chasing, helped out by UAE and Sunweb mostly. For today, Rowan Dennis doing a lot of the pacemaking, particularly in the middle section of this stage, just keeping that break at like 3-4 minutes, keeping it in check. At no point did I think the breakaway was going to succeed because there was multiple teams. Even Bora were kind of helping out a little bit. And as it got closer to the finish, there was a descent sort of into the finish, not a proper descent, but definitely a downhill of some description. And after that last intermediate sprint, all the GC teams came to the front and just started drilling it. Jumbo-Visma with Tony Martin initially. Then Almeida had the Quick-Step boys driving it on the right-hand side just after Jumbo-Visma, Ineos as well. But then they kind of all disappeared. I was actually pretty surprised by that. I feel like they abandoned Thomas a little bit today in that finale, and he had to fend for himself, which he did a fine job of, but still, like I know Gunnar is in the pink jersey, but his job is to drive it for Thomas and keep him safe at the front. And I think if Luke Rowe was win the Maglia Rosa today, somehow, he would have still done his job of driving it on the front for Geraint Thomas into the bottom of that climb. So, yeah, I think a little bit weird from Ineos. Definitely not their best team of Van Baarle, Rowe, etc., Kwiatkowski, who are just Tour de France veterans in Grand Tours. So yeah, something to watch. Something like I mentioned the same thing about Jumbo-Visma back in the Tour. Bora Hansgrohe working kind of indicated that hold up, Peter Sagan's still in this race, and this is a finish that's not outside of his capability. He's obviously feeling good for it today. But Sunweb were working for Michael Matthews. So UAE were UAE, I should have mentioned Michael Berg in the youth classification jersey, in the white jersey, because Almeida is in the purple points jersey. Berg was working very, very hard on the front, doing a fantastic job today, backing up after yesterday's third. But yeah, I'm not sure who. They sort of all went into the bottom of the climb together, to be honest. They called the breakaway with about 10 Ks to go, and UAE eventually started to turn up the heat. And I think there was Giovanni Visconti there at the base as well, making it, trying to make it hard. Like, why, Benji, explain to people, why would some teams want to make this as hard as possible from the base? Because we saw FDJ pacing, but not too hard right at the start of this climb.
Yeah, there's two different kind of people with two different goals here. You've got the likes of Ulissi with the squad of UAE. You've got the likes of Demar with the squad of Groupama. These are two opposite examples. UAE is going to try and pace it hard because they know if Demar is with Ulissi at 100 meters to go, then Demar beats Ulissi in the sprint. Now, the difference is Groupama tries to set a pace which is just low enough to keep Demar on the threshold to allow him to stay in the group. And they tried that for about the first kilometer and 200 meters of that climb, but we quickly saw Demar fall through the peloton, to be honest. So yeah, the teams like UAE succeeded in making that climb much harder.
Yeah, exactly. And then you've got riders like Matthews, who are probably more on the Ulysses side of things, you'd think, and Sagan, maybe UAE, etc., would be thinking he's more in the Demar spectrum of not climbing so well. I think no one was really talking about Sagan too much as a favourite for this stage. And I made a video this afternoon because I was like, remember when Sagan used to just destroy stages like this? And we sort of mentioned it at the end of the pod last night because we were talking about Matthews and Ulissi, and they're the heavy favourites, and Almeida maybe. And then we were like, well, Sagan used to always win stages like this, or at least he'd definitely be in the top three. And so he was looking pretty good. Eventually, it was the main move is when UAE turned up the heat massively. I'm not sure who it was. Maybe Rui Costa I saw in the bunch. No, sorry, he was at Liege Bastogne Liege. Yeah, I was watching both races at the same time, so you gotta forgive any crossovers like that. It was either Valerio Conti, I think it was Conti, who led out hard for Diego Ulissi, and then really let out hard, almost gapped, created a small gap with 4 riders before Ulissi even attacked. Then I think Ulissi attacked Wackerman, then tried to follow him, Luca Wackerman, but it was, Ulissi really strong attack from quite far out, over 750 meters to go. Sagan bridged across, and then I think Mikel Honore was there as well, the rider from De Koning Quickstep. He was one of the only ones that could follow the move of Diego Ulissi, but it looked like Ulissi had Honore on the limit at that point already with 500 meters to go. They had a fairly big gap to the other riders, like Matthews, Thomas. I saw the Ineos jersey at the front there too. They were a good 5 seconds behind. And then, Luca Wackerman, I think he'd just attacked out of that group or attacked a bit earlier. The man from Vini Zabu KTM, he ended up coming 5th on this stage, by the way. And people were saying I was high in a preview show for hyping him up too much. I'm telling you, this guy should be on a World Tour team. He's a World Tour level rider. And look how aggressively he rode in this finale. I know he's an older rider, but this year he's World Tour quality rider. Then Sagan, dialing back the clock, Benji, coming across and bridging to Diego Ulissi, who had admittedly maybe sat up a little bit with 550 to go with Honore, but no one could follow Sagan across. It was just him going across, it seemed. And I think maybe he used Wackerman as a platform to get across, or Honore, I can't remember which one exactly, but still, no one followed him from the main group, Matthews, etc., or Almeida, or Brambi, or Nibali. And then he joined a group of Ulissi, Honore, and Peter Sagan. Honore is a Danish rider, by the way, for Quickstep. You might not know him because he had a fair while off. I think he broke his back at some point, similar injury to what I had, actually. So it's good to see him back. And then Ulissi, I think, was on the left-hand side behind Honore. Honore was leading them out. Sagan had just bridged across to them. It was about 250 meters to go then at that point as he just made contact. Honore sort of started sprinting really early, came off the barriers a little bit, opened a nice gap for Ulissi on the inside. He didn't really squeeze him, but it was kind of tight, but it was fine, and he held his line. Ulissi squeezed through. Sagan had to start sprinting on the right of Honore, sort of on this uphill little pinch in the last 125 meters, and immediately when you saw Sagan kick, you knew he didn't have it. Ulissi was kicking away easily, even though he already had an advantage when I think Sagan just got to them. So, magic win from Diego Ulissi. He's had, his 7th Giro d'Italia stage win. He's got 37 career wins. He's just climbing so well, and I was just, super impressed with what UAE and Ulissi did today, and also just as impressed with Peter Sagan coming second. But should we be surprised, Benji, by Sagan coming second? Are you surprised? I'm in 2 camps. I haven't really decided whether I'm surprised yet, which kind of means I'm not surprised.
I'm surprised with the current form that he had in the 2020 season so far, and I did not expect him to close that gap so easily, not going to lie. But I'm also I feel like he's also still not there as in the days where he could actually win these races, because in the past, Ulissi would have lost this one against Sagan. But today, that's very much different, and I do feel like Sagan deserves credit for this one. I did not see this coming, so I guess that's good on his part, and I do expect if he keeps up this form, he's going to have a large chance of winning a stage in this Giro, which was his actual goal going into this one. Now, one of the things, Honore, we spoke about him a lot already, but he was one of the people that I certainly did not have on my radar for this kind of stage. I feel like he was also always a top 20 guy on small Belgian cobble classics, and I think in Milano-Torino he was up there as well, but that was a flattish terrain as preparation for Milano-San Remo. So, I genuinely didn't have him on my radar. I didn't really know what rider he was either, because he always top 20s everything. So I was like, okay, maybe he's that kind of rider, but it's good to see that he's coming out in some kind of terrain for once, because I always felt he was a rider on the Koenig that I could not profile well, and it's good that I know what he actually does now. But additionally, I do want to give a shout out to the guy that came 15 today that we also did not really see coming in the time trial. Sobrero, he is actually good on this one as well, a 15th position. So that guy is at the age of 23 getting a 7th spot on the first time trial and a 15th spot on the second stage. So honestly, insane work already by that NTT rider. And I think the likes of GC riders also need a bit of assessment. We don't have anyone actually losing time. If I look at it, we do see that Nibali's 8th on this one, so good result for him. Thomas as well with an 11th spot, full sung up there as well. Did you expect anything more from these guys, or do you think that they're just keeping themselves in a position where they can keep this up and they can not lose too much effort on a stage like this, not risk anything, and come out of this towards an Etna stage with the same amount of time as the others?
I thought there was going to be time gaps when I saw what UAE did, and UAE were like, we're not going to the line with Matthews or Sagan or Demar, so we're going to make this climb as hard as possible from far out. And Conti's definitely a man that can do that. And yeah, and Ulysses probably a better climber in these sort of finishes, it seems, than Matthews or Sagan. I mean, Ulysses came third in Giro dell'Emilia and 8th in Lombardia, second in Gran Piemonte. So he's climbing way, way better than Matthews, and so that's why they wanted to make the climb as hard as possible. And it was perfect tactics from UAE. Hats off to them. They're doing a great job at the moment. Good last month or so for them. But yeah, I thought there was going to be a time gap, Benji, because I thought Almeida was going to be able to actually get a gap on at least a gap enough to actually have some seconds count against someone like Kruijswijk maybe. But Kruijswijk actually did pretty well. 16th, like for a guy that's not very punchy at all, that's solid. Andre Vendrame, maybe a little bit disappointing. Pello Bilbao, like that's pretty good, 9th position. But yeah, Luca Wackerman, 5th. Michael Matthews came 4th, by the way. So Ulissi 1st, Sagan 2nd, Honore 3rd, Matthews 4th. Almeida 6th, Wackerman 5th. Yeah, the Matthews winning the bunch sprint, it's clear that he didn't follow either of the two moves. Whether he couldn't or didn't want to, I don't know which, but he didn't follow the UAE Ulissi move, which was kind of telegraphed, to be honest. Like, Conti went to the front, they started driving it. It was pretty telegraphed. It wasn't a sneak attack. And then I didn't really see the exact time when Sagan attacked out of the main bunch, bridging across, but he didn't follow that either. So it's going to be difficult to win stages like this when you've got two of the favourites going up the road in the last kilometre like that, or 800 metres. But yeah, it's not the end of the world, but it's clear that on a finish like this that's quite hard, you've got to rate UAE and Ulissi. And even, Sagan, who I thought on a hilly finish now I'd kind of had Matthews over Sagan, but that seems to be kind of wrong. Actually, maybe Sagan just got his timing right and Matthews didn't. But yeah, some other riders I thought would do better on this stage. Nathan Haas, a man he's come like 4th in Amstel Gold previously. I don't know if he was out of position or whatever, but like losing, I think he lost like 90 seconds today. Maybe he missed out. Maybe he was doing work as a domestique or whatever. But yeah, sometimes I'd be kind of expecting him to be going for this as more of a all-rounder, one-day guy who can climb as well. Like his one stage in Burgos, Oman, and yeah, just 4th in Amstel in 2017. Just thought he could be sort of a race or a stage he'd be targeting, but he was quite a way down. Obviously, Rick Zabel, I think, lost the KOM jersey today. Matteo Fabro, I guess he was leading out for Peter Sagan. But yeah, it was nothing really happened on GC. Thomas looking pretty good. Thomas, though, very isolated. So yeah, just something to bear in mind. The Ganner and Gegenhardt were same time as him, but really Jonathan Narvaez was the last man I saw actually doing work for Thomas to keep him in position. But yeah, do you Any learnings from this for GC, Benji? Any learnings for riders going forward? Do we need to revise how we view Ulissi going forward, winning stages in this year's Giro?
I don't think so. I think we had a good mindset on Ulysses being a favorite on this one, so it's not really a surprise. What was a surprise to me is that Matthews didn't win it. Not going to lie, I had him as dead favorite for this one, but he seemed to be a little short to stay with the likes of Ulysses on this one. I was looking through the standings to try and find people that potentially lost time on purpose today regarding tomorrow's Etna stage.
Ooh.
And honestly, I can't find anyone that really lost a lot of time. But we had Antoine Tolok lose 7 minutes. Geoffrey Bouchard, my KOM guy, but I'm not sure if he crashed or lost time because two riders from Ajzer crashed with about 12 kilometers to go. So it could be that he was one of them. It could not be. So I can't really go off of that. Matthew Holmes lost 6 minutes and a half today. So potentially he's doing that assessing tomorrow's stage. He's a breakaway guy from Tirreno, so he's surely going to try it. I think he won that stage that Port was supposed to win in the Santos Tour Down Under because, Port always wins that except for this year. Jaakko Haninen lost 4 minutes and a half, but again, as a rider, don't know if he crashed or not. Like you said, pattern at the start. He is losing 5 minutes, whether it's on purpose or not, but it's a bit too difficult to figure out who of these people actually lost it on purpose because so many people lost like 6, 7, 8 minutes today that it's kind of hard to start guessing, to be honest. So I don't know. I'm going to deep dive into it tonight and I'll try and see if I can put something on Twitter later on. If I can find someone that actually is doing a bit of a sandbagging today, but doesn't look like it for now. Anyway, outside of that, I've got the feeling that, I expected more from Vendrame. He was up there a lot in the end, but couldn't make the final leap. So yeah, I expected more from him. Not going to lie.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we're not criticizing riders often. We're more saying, particularly with the young riders like that, you got Honore taking that step. Larkerman, he's not a young rider, but he's still improving in a way we thought that was possible. Vendrame, we thought could be that rider who's taken that next step to really contesting World Tour stages like this, getting in the top 5 with some sort of regularity. But didn't look possible today. Tomorrow's stage, where we could see some GC action from Enna to Etna, from Lingua Glossa to Piano Provenzana. It's a rolly stage once again. It starts with, in the 151 kilometer stage, a descent and then 2 sort of Liège style climbs, actually 1.9 Ks, 8.3%, 1.4 Ks, 6.3% in the first 20 Ks. Then a rolling downhill, pretty flat, then an easy climb to Nicolosi, 9.1 Ks at 4%. GC guys won't be concerned by them at all. A few other sort of small climbs, 4 Ks at 5%, just after the first intermediate sprint at 108 Ks. Then, just 20 Ks later, there's the second intermediate sprint at the base of Mount Etna at Lingua Glossa, bit strange, and then the 18.6k, 6.7% climb up Mount Etna tomorrow. So it's an undulating climb. It starts pretty gradual. It starts pretty easy, to be honest. Actually, the first 2Ks are easy. Then there's actually some easy sections in the 13th and 15th Ks. And then it's really the last couple of kilometers are like 9%, 9.5%. So this is where I thought Vlasov could launch something tomorrow, and he's a guy that I just thought had more. He's got more punch than Kruijswijk to get away from people later in stages. You saw that, he won Giro dell'Emilia. Kruijswijk's never won a race like that. I don't think. Don't no one dig up something from 2011 that he won. But like recently, he doesn't win a race like that. So Vlasov got more kick, but he's not here obviously now. Kruijswijk's already lost a minute 40. People got to be aggressive, Benji. I mean, I don't know what will happen. If you put a gun to my head and say what will happen tomorrow, I'd say on GC, nothing. That being said, Simon Yates is a lot more aggressive than a lot of the riders that were at the Tour de France, Pogačar accepted. But Yates didn't lose that much time either in the TT, so he didn't lose much time as Kruijswijk. So I don't really know what will happen tomorrow. Not enough people have lost time to, like, a lot of time to make a breakaway go out the road. Fine. Maybe people just want to, Ineos wants someone else to take the Maglia Rosa. They think Gunner's going to lose it on the climb anyway. So if a breakaway rider takes it, whatever, it means they can take the day off controlling things. I think that'd actually be pretty smart from Ineos. I think Gunner showed today that he's not getting up that climb, I don't think, unless they go very slow, not losing enough time. So, yeah. Or maybe you think he is, Benji. You reckon?
No, I totally agree with you. I just
Yeah,
imagine them going very, very slow.
they have to go very, very slow up the climb. No one doing anything. But yeah, I think they should. Ineos should take the day off tomorrow. Let the Maglia Rosa go to someone else in the breakaway if they go. If it's someone like Tolhoek and he gains 3 minutes on you, that's fine. I mean, he's not going to win GC. So that's what I think should happen. Whether it does, I'm not sure. Whether Simon Yates takes up the opportunity to gain a little bit of time on Thomas if he sees weakness in the last 2 kilometres as well. I mean, you can only gain so much time as well with a big effort in the last 2Ks. We saw that with Roglic, even Pogacar as well. Pogacar inched his way back into contention. It's not those big leaps where you gain like a minute or so. Pogacar gained a fair bit on Pedersen's stage, but like 2 minutes or something, you're not going to gain if you attack in the last 2Ks. So Kruijswijk, I don't expect anything from. Fuglsang, I think, will be hanging on. Yates will be the only man I'd really expect to be attacking Thomas in that last 2-3Ks. And I don't think Thomas would be able to follow him, actually, to be honest. But it's whether the reward is worth the energy expenditure for him, given that he's already second on GC out of the GC guys. But yeah, what do you think will happen tomorrow, Benji?
I think it's going to be really close, but I said that Simon Yates would win the stage. I think it's going to be really close between the breakaway and the peloton because the Etna is a pretty long climb and pretty high cadence for the peloton. It's not like it's very steep at certain sections, so it's going to be a high-speed climb. Usually there's a lot of wind issues, so I'm curious how that's going to go. I haven't checked the forecast for that area in Italy and Sicily, but I always remember that they were always talking about wind on top of the Etna because there's not many trees or something around the parkour, so all the wind hits the riders, I guess. That is the most simple explanation of it, I guess. Now, I'm going to guess that the breakaway takes it, but I feel like I want to say Simon Yates wins it. I know that Nibali will try and attack because he was up there today already. He's eager, and he will want to show what he's got, even though it might not be ideal considering it's not week 3 of a Grand Tour. But I'm going to go ahead and go for an extremely dark horse outsider, and I'm going to go for Dylan Sunderland of NTT from the breakaway. So, do you know Dylan Sunderland?
Yeah, I'm aware of who he is, but still doesn't make what you said okay.
He was 13th in the Tour de Langkawi mountain stage, just behind his teammate Louis Manches, and I think that he's going to show today that he's World Tour territory. So, yeah, Dylan Sunderland is my name call for stage 3 of the Giro.
I'm going with Attila Valter, the Hungarian, tomorrow.
Oh, good call.
Yeah, I knew you'd be jealous. So I'll be betting on him for tomorrow. Full disclosure, sorry, it's not betting advice, but I remember during the Tour de France, I gave you my picks where I was like, this is my proper pick, like with the Lopez one, and then I'll say if I'm not too sure, I'll say I'm not too sure. But tomorrow, Valter, I like this stage for him. If the breakaway is allowed to go, that's the sort of man. Even Zakarin tomorrow, this is the sort of stage he could win 2 if he was going to win one because the descents aren't very long. I don't know if they're technical or not, and it's a mountaintop finish. There's not like a proper HC climb or a Cat 1 beforehand. So, yeah, Valter, Zakarin, but I really like Valter for tomorrow. And if it's the GC guys, I think Yates is the best climber out of the GC guys. So I'd be picking him. And I think he's got Hamilton and Haig looking really good. I think, Haig was, I don't know whether he was that far up there today. Yates was in pretty good position as well early. Lucas Hamilton came 10th. So, I think Michelin Scott probably got the strongest climbing team. Almeida, Benji, too hard for him? What do you expect to happen with him tomorrow?
No, he's not going to lose time. I think that he's going to have the benefit of not being a all-out favorite for GC, and if it comes down to the GC group still being one group with a kilometer to go, then Almeida's going to ride away and win. So I've got full confidence in Almeida getting a top 5 in this Giro from this point onwards. Definitely with Vlasov already gone, he's going to be head favorite for the white jersey. I think the only person that could touch him there is maybe McNulty if they go for GC with McNulty. I'm not sure that's the case, but McNulty has a good TT, was a bit unlucky with late starters yesterday, but beat all of those late starters with utter ease. And genuinely, I think he could top 10 this Giro, but Almeida is on course for top 5. I can feel it. With today, again, an amazing result, being up there, 6th position, I think, in the stage. So I'm expecting him to not lose time, be in the group with the all-out favorites, and if that group of all-out favorites is towards the end, then he'll do a similar attack to Pozzo Vivo in 2017, I think, where he attacked with about 800 meters to go and looked to be going on for a stage win. The difference is that Almeida can actually finish on the stage, and Pozzo Vivo can't.
Yeah, I wouldn't be too sure in this sort of climb. I think if Mitchelton Scott, if there was going to be a GC team that takes it up with Hamilton and Haig, they could make it quite hard on this climb. And then Yates attacking in that last section, in the steep section. I'm not sure Almeida would be able to follow him, but that really depends on whether Mitchelton Scott do that. I think it probably is more likely that Benji's scenario eventuates where they don't go full for the entire climb, which plays into Almeida's hands. He's got a better kick than all those GC guys by a significant margin, in my view. But that was the Giro, a pretty interesting stage, actually. A lot of little narratives forming there. You know, Uldisi versus Matthews. Is Sagan back? Is Thomas going to be isolated? Vlasov being out, etc. So, yeah, quite a nice stage. Actually, even though not too much happened until the finale. Yeah, thanks to Lacole, as always, for supporting us, our Giro show, and making it possible. 25 podcasts for the Giro and 23 sleepless nights for me and Benji. Actually, no, Benji gets plenty of sleep. I'm the one that doesn't get sleep, so I don't feel sorry for him. But yeah, Lacole, make that possible. On to Liege Bastogne Liege. It was on simultaneously. I'm sure if any of you were watching along at both, let us know what sort of setup you had on the YouTube comments. Like, what operation were you running? Which race did you have on the big screen? I had Liege on the laptop in front of me because I knew it was going to finish after the Giro d'Italia stage. But yeah, 257 kilometer stage, pretty similar profile to what you'd expect. Obviously, the punchy climbs the whole way. The main deciding factors are usually the Côte de la Redoute, 2Ks at 9% with about 35 Ks to go. And then there's the Côte de la Rochefoucauld, 244 Ks in. Bet you like that French pronunciation, Benji. Then a 12K sort of descent into the finish, and then like it was a flat last 2.2 to 3 Ks. But what happened in this stage, Benji, sort of initially, it's kind of like the Giro, really. It was a predictable breakaway forming and then control from the teams you'd expect in the peloton.
Yeah, the breakaway, I never really saw an opportunity of them actually doing something. It was just the forced breakaway of the day. One name I want to take out of that is Matthijs Paasgens, who once again was in the breakaway. He was also there in Flèche Wallonne. He was not the strongest in the breakaway though, but that breakaway got gobbled up with about a good 25 to 30 kilometers to go. But honestly, we were talking about this yesterday in the preview, that you've got La Flèche Wallonne, that is basically a race where it's, you can say, boring until the last 1,400 meters, but I felt like this edition was relatively similar, but the last 14 kilometers. Like, LBL last year was so much more intense because it started earlier with the likes of Fulsang and so forth attacking. Today, we saw some attempts of that. We saw some attempts. The first person that attacked properly was Luis Leon Sanchez, if I recall correctly. And the people that bridged up were Rui Costa. And very early on, I think with 20 kilometers to go, this was all past the La Redoute because no one really attempted something on La Redoute. On La Redoute, we basically had Devenant spacing for Alaphilippe and Hirschi being paced to the front. Did he have a teammate there? I don't think so in the end. But the tempo on La Redoute was big, but didn't do damage.
Was in trouble.
Yeah, I thought so as well. I think Hirschi was pretty isolated on this one. By the way, the youngest team average at the start here. 22 years and a half average age. That utterly insane. Benoit being the oldest of that team. That's so surprising because he's not the oldest rider for sure in this peloton. So now, continuing onwards, we had that attack with Luis and Sanchez, Rui Costa, and one person that bridged up, this was between the La Redoute and Rochefoucauld, was Alaphilippe. And it was such an early attempt because I did not see that potentially succeeding at all. And you got to keep in mind, Alaphilippe had been nervous the whole stage. He actually ended up in a crash at a certain point, but I don't think he actually crashed. I think he had to step out of his pedal and broke his shoe somehow, because I think he switched shoe twice, or he was trying to fix it and then had to switch shoe. But by the way, got to talk about it. Switching a shoe on a bike, how extreme is that? I would never be able to do that. So you take the new shoe and you put it in the pedal and you use that as like your force bag to try and keep the shoe on and get that shoe on. That's like insane technique for me. Like, I was so surprised seeing that.
I mean, Alaphilippe spent about 20 minutes after he'd had that touchdown, I think what you said, he unclipped to avoid the crash maybe in that corner and scraped the cleat on the ground when he put his right foot down, and then the cleat wasn't really clipping in properly. And he had about 3 bike changes, 2 shoe changes, like just consternation at the back with his car for like 15 minutes straight. I said, could Mads Pedersen just drill it on the front to put me out of my misery, please? So he just gets on with it, because, it's just, at least they obviously got it sorted out. Benji glossed over the biggest news of the day, which was Tim de Klerk pulling with 87 Ks to go and Chris Froome getting dropped. I'm not sure what climb that was. Maybe it was the Côte de Mont Le Sol, one of the first major climbs, or the Côte de Vannes. But yeah, that was it's kind of crazy seeing that happen. Like, it's a shame. Like, I sort of brought it up facetiously, but it is a real shame seeing that, and I hope that I just can't see Froome improving this year, particularly. Maybe if he gets a proper winter break into him again, that'll be able to help him get better for next season. But that's really far off the pace. I mean, he's never been great in one-day races, so maybe it's not a big deal. But getting dropped when Tim de Klerk pulls uphill is not a great sign for the Vuelta, which starts sooner than we think. It starts in like a couple of weeks, right? So other news was Greg Van Avermaet crashing, and Jay McCarthy, the Queensland boy, crashing for Hansgrohe. And I think Adam Yates was somehow involved in that crash, but we didn't really see him, and he had to abandon as well. He was one of our picks. Well, I sort of had him for a top 10 today. And they hit there's a bit of road furniture. It wasn't padded, didn't have any fluoro stuff on it, wasn't highlighted, didn't have a marshal on it, and one of them, either Van Avermaet or McCarthy, hit it, and they hit it fucking hard. And particularly Greg Van Avermaet, he went down hard. I think Jay got up, maybe he's clutching his shoulder, I'm not sure how he is, but GVA was shaken. And he doesn't crash that often, I don't think. And even if he does, he doesn't abandon that often either. He's very consistent finishing races and Grand Tours. And just a real shame. I was worried for a second because he was in like full fetal position on the ground. So hopefully he gets concussion tested. I'm glad that he immediately got pulled out of the race and the medic was with him and didn't try and continue, etc. But that was a shame. What should actually happen, Benji, in that sort of road furniture, so people know what the norm is for that?
So in Belgium, there's this new invention that I think Gent-Wevelgem and the likes of those races, I think the Flanders Classics races are using. They're investing in that, and they've used it a lot on whatever classic we had about a week and a half ago. Totally forgot. But in general, it means that you've got flashing lights and you've got a fluo thingy on it that is huge, so that all the riders in the peloton can see that there's something dangerous there. And there is arrows that are indicating which side you can go on. Now, usually in the past, because obviously not every race has the money to invest in that stuff, You have a motorbike rider that's standing in front of the sign, the traffic sign, and he has a little flag that he's waving, on which he's showing that there's something dangerous so that everybody in the peloton is able to see it. Now, that's very dangerous, first of all, for the people that stand there. Honestly, if I had that job, I genuinely shit my pants every time a rider passes me. And the riders also, we saw it, I think, 2 days ago in Bing Bang Tour. We saw in one of the stages that there was a corner where, I think this picture is on my Twitter somewhere, but there was this intersection and the peloton went to the left in that intersection, and half of the riders chose to take the footpath on the left and half took the road. And because of that, the motorbike rider is standing in the middle, and it's super dangerous for that guy. I think we've had plenty of those actually getting injured already in the past because of this way of signaling something. So the investment in that new kind of stuff is always great. But again, next to that, you would probably need some padding, like you said, to make sure that when someone hits a sign that they don't just facepalm straight into the sign, because Van Avermaet did that today, and he was looking like he was almost knocked out when he was standing up. So, yeah, that's not great to see, and I think they can invest in that kind of stuff, at least in a motorbike rider standing there, even if it's dangerous for the lad. Yeah, it's an issue that is in a lot of races, but this is a clear position where there had to be signaling, and there wasn't. So it annoys me, and it probably annoys the riders as well, because this is dangerous and it's not necessarily needing to be. Because I think for an organization like ASO, because ASO organizes LBL, then I expect more than just nothing. So I expect more from ASO, honestly.
Yeah, maybe they did have padding on a lot of the road furniture. Maybe they just missed one. It's not the worst safety thing I've ever seen. Yeah, not ideal either. But getting back to the race, they were coming up to the last climb of the day, which was the Côte de la Roche au Faucon, I think, if that's correct, Benji. And like, it's definitely a steep enough climb that you can make a difference, and that was where attacks were going to go. It was with 17 Ks to go that they were pretty much all together, really. They started to separate a little bit on the redoute, but as Benji said, Dave and Enns didn't drive it so hard that there were splits. He just kept it hard. And then Tom Dumoulin went on the front, Benji. Kind of surprised, clearly working for Roglic, I think, and driving it really hard from the base of Rochefoucauld. And yeah, then Hirschi was right on his wheel. Alaphilippe was marking there. Alaphilippe was marking everyone this race from like 35 Ks in. Alaphilippe was marking everyone. So like, I actually think Alaphilippe was the strongest rider in this race. And then Alaphilippe attacked over the top of Tom Dumoulin. It was kind of weird. It was like Roglic was 6-7 wheels deep when Dumoulin was doing that lead out. Probably would have made more sense for him to be right there with Dumoulin near Alaphilippe, like Kwiatkowski, Hirschi, etc. were there. But really strong, like Roglic had fantastic legs today, because when Alaphilippe attacked, Hirschi snapped straight onto his wheel on Rochefoucauld, and then Pogacar bridged across to them as well. No one had been talking about him. I think we were remiss in not really talking about Pogacar enough on the preview yesterday as well. I think we probably did. I'm being a bit harsh on ourselves. Mike Woods couldn't quite bridge across to them. And then it was this... Actually, no, take it back a step, Benji. It was Hirschi marking Alaphilippe first, and they did have a gap, and Kwiatkowski was properly dropped, and it was Roglic and Pogacar maybe relaying, trying to get across to him. And then Hirschi like countered and started pulling in front of Alaphilippe, and then Alaphilippe stopped working, and then the two Slovenians caught up to him. So it makes no... Like, what's the reason why Alaphilippe wouldn't work with Hirschi at that moment when they have Roglic, Pogacar, MVDP all dropped?
Honestly, don't know, but I've got the feeling that there's quite a lot of things in this race where I'm like, what is Alaphilippe doing? Why is he doing this? And we'll get into that later on, but I feel like he always makes a bit of, not odd decisions, because he's obviously a winner, so we can't really say that he made an odd decision at the World Championships or anything, but at this point, I feel like he could have worked with Hirschi and it would have been similar to the second stage of the Tour de France. Then again, the two people behind were going to work together. It's Roglic and Pogacar. They are pals, even though they did ride after each other today quite clearly, so they weren't going to gift each other an LBL victory here. As you said, they were catching up, but what was noticeable for me was when they caught up to Hirschi and Alaphilippe, behind we had Kwiatkowski and what was the other guy? Help me here.
Woods.
Woods, indeed. Woods was behind that four-man group, and then Kwiatkowski was dropped by Woods for a bit. Now, what Kwiatkowski did in that descent was crazy. He flew to Woods' wheel, flew past him, and basically just dropped him in the spot in the downhill. Like, genuinely top downhill speeds. And yeah, I admire nice descents, and his cornering was perfect. Kwiatkowski, man. I think he's an underrated descender, mainly because we always see him being caught up in the peloton, working for someone in the descent. So because of that, we don't see him as in full force usually in the sense. But I admire it so much. But Woods, yeah, he seemed to be done by then, and that was certainly the case. But Kwiatkowski also, we had him catch up to that four-man group. Then we had another attack when the tempo in that four-man group stopped, and Kwiatkowski was in that wheel as well. We had an attack by Hirschi, who launched off the front, and once again, the same thing happened. Alaphilippe bridges up to Hirschi, and they've got a gap of like a good 20, 30 meters on Pogacar and Roglic, and behind we had Kwiatkowski dropped again. He was not coming back at that point, so we had again the same thing we just spoke about. The first two sitting up, Alaphilippe and Hirschi, not really working well together, and the other two came back. So very repetitive behavior there, and it looks like they really don't want to offer each other anything, those first two.
Well, I think Hirschi was pulling, then he flicked Alaphilippe, and then Alaphilippe wouldn't pull. And then after that's happened a couple of times, well, you're not gonna keep pulling because then you're gonna get attacked. And like we've seen it, that's what Alaphilippe does, and sometimes it works. Like it's probably sometimes good race strategy, I guess. If someone is stupid enough to pull you, then you can then attack them after you sat on for a bit. But when you're wearing the World Championships jersey and you're Julian Alaphilippe, no one's going to work for you anymore and think that you're more tired than they are. Like there's not even any point in faking anymore. And eventually those four came together. The two Slovenians, Pogacar, Roglic, Hirschi and Alaphilippe, they were pretty much getting onto the flatter section and then onto the descent as well, before the descent proper. And even, as a group of four, they weren't really working too well together. Alaphilippe was like delaying his turns, skipping turns. Roglic was pulling super hard. Roglic was doing a fantastic job, doing, I think, a lion's share of the work. Hirschi was kind of doing the shortest turns possible. I think the two Slovenians were working the hardest, to be honest. I think they were and that was correct, by the way. You've got Mathieu van der Poel not that far behind. It's not like Van der Poel got dropped 50 Ks ago when they really turned it up on the initial climbs. Like, he was 18 seconds behind them in a large group with Port and probably Uran, etc. But yeah, mainly everyone was looking at Van der Poel. So yeah, definitely makes sense to be working, even if you are with other favourites in that group. It's better than trying to outsprint Mathieu van der Poel in the flat finish. And Alaphilippe kind of wasn't working. Eventually, when the gap started to come down a little bit, Van der Poel was pulling really hard with actually your boy Richie Port doing a pretty good job. And the gap came down to maybe like 15 seconds. But then once they got onto the descent proper, they really didn't look like that main group was going to bring it back. And then you sent me a DM, Benji, once they were like just on the end of the descent. They had an 18 to 20 second gap. Alaphilippe, Hirschi, Pogacar and Roglic on the Van der Poel, Benoot, Barguil, Kwiatkowski, Woods group. You sent me a DM that there was someone in the middle of those two who no one had seen any images of.
Yes, and it's one of those riders that, well, he's got one skill and he likes to use it, and he's a monster with it. Matej Mohoric, the best descender in the world when it comes to aerodynamic descending, and his technique is great as well, but I expect that to see, well, I think there's still other people that have better technique in descending, but his aerodynamic descending is so good that he just beats everyone in descending, and he attacked in that last descent, and in that last small descent, he went from that 25-second gap of that second group, he was on 10 seconds suddenly, and the moment they reached the flat part into Liège, he was honestly straight behind them, like a good 7 seconds behind. I was so surprised, but also not really. I was mainly surprised that Mohoric made that group, because I didn't expect it. I thought he would not make that group, and he was with the likes of Van der Poel, Woods, Benoit, Barguil, Kwiatkowski, then Dan Martin. So these are climbers that I rate higher when it comes to punching than Matej Mohoric, but surely didn't disappoint with that move, and he actually caught up with the group just before the sprint, didn't he?
Yeah, well, Mohoric did the same thing, a similar thing in Milano San Remo this year, actually. Not as hard a climb, obviously not as climby, of course, Milano San Remo, but he got over the Poggio pretty well and was leading them on the descent, chasing Alaphilippe and Wout van Aert, and was dropping riders, and I think maybe even had to slow up. I think he's the best descender in the world right now. I remember in Tour de France when Caruso and Landa were telling him to slow down on the Col de la Loze stage on the big descent of the day. He's just incredible to shut down that gap, a 20-second gap, primarily on descent, which isn't that long, by the way, not that long a descent. It's the one that Jakob Fuglsang nearly crashed in last year when his back wheel twitched. And like Alaphilippe, Roglic, Pogacar, and Hirschi, they weren't hanging around too much on the descent. Like they were in super tuck, they were moving, but they obviously weren't like Mohoric. Unfortunately, we'll never see the images of it, and it's a shame because if they had a drone on the road or something, and if you got a full view image or even his GoPro footage of Mohoric on this descent off Rochefoucauld, you could just you'd go viral on social media. It'd be incredible to watch for everybody. It'd be a great way to market the sport. But anyway, the four guys up front, one of the four favourites, started playing cat and mouse predictably because they did have a 20-second gap. They could actually afford to do so. The Van der Poel group was quite a way back, and Van der Poel wasn't like people saying Amstel Gold, Amstel Gold. Well, he was trying to rely on other people to pull, and everyone was sitting on him as well, so that wasn't helping him too much. And Mohoric bridges across to the Alaphilippe, Hirschi, Roglic, Pogacar group. We're on the flat run into the finish in Liège, and we've got three Slovenians in that group of five now. Mohoric goes straight to the front, and I don't know, I think he didn't do the best job, Mohoric. I think he could have sat on the back of them for a second or soft pedaled, allowed himself a 2 to 3 second break before they realised he was there and then attacked them with momentum. Instead, he just went straight past them, and Alaphilippe pretty easily got on his wheel, so there wasn't a large enough speed differential when Mohoric got there. Alaphilippe, the man who'd in the same race closed down every attack, even from riders like Rui Costa, really early in the race, before the Rochefoucauld, or before it was really heating up, had closed down Hirschi's attack and then failed to work just when he was with Hirschi. Alaphilippe then from 1,300 meters or more, well, actually pretty much from the halfway down the descent onwards, went to the front and was pulling, and not just soft pedaling, he wasn't going full, but he was still pulling a decent amount. So I'm not sure if he knew what the gap was. He was also the man that shut down the move to Mohoric. So he'd both worked a lot, not always when not always when he had to, and then also didn't work when it would have made sense, when it was just would have been a head-to-head sprint with Marc Hirschi. And Hirschi wasn't pulling at all in the last 1,500 metres. He remembered stage 2 of the Tour de France when he got pipped in the sprint by Alaphilippe, and he was saving his energy. He was riding a really smart race, Hirschi. Even when he was pulling in the last 4Ks, it was the shortest turns possible. Roglic and Pogacar were doing a really good job, for the group, that is, pulling hard. And yeah, Alaphilippe then comes around Mohoric. Mohoric drops off pretty much. He starts his sprint actually off the wheel of Mohoric, starts the sprint off the wheel of Mohoric, maybe 200 meters out, 225 out. Mohoric was on the right-hand barrier. Alaphilippe goes to the left of him, moves back in front of Mohoric to the right-hand barrier, which is smart. You should do something like that because you're at that moment when you move back to in front of Mohoric, who's going backwards, you cut off the draft from behind you for a second or so. And then he's on the right-hand barrier. Hirschi slotted on his wheel, Pogacar behind him, Roglic fourth wheel, all on the barriers. Hirschi then comes out of Alaphilippe's wheel on the barriers to the left-hand side. So Alaphilippe's on the right-hand side on the barriers. Hirschi starts his sprint to the left-hand side of Alaphilippe. This is with 100 meters to go, maybe. Alaphilippe is losing ground to Hirschi. Hirschi's gaining pretty quickly on him. And I think maybe Hirschi was laying off a little bit before he started sprinting. And Alaphilippe looks over his left shoulder. He's still on the barriers at this point, flush with them, by the way. You couldn't even squeeze a rider on his right-hand side, no matter how small. Looks over the left shoulder, sees Hirschi coming up, and says, nah, not today. Fully moves his bike and chops Hirschi, moves from the barriers to the middle of the road, and Hirschi had to unclip. He made contact with his front wheel, completely cost all of Hirschi's momentum, and Pogacar, who was then, it was then a concertina effect. Pogacar had been on Hirschi's wheel. He had his wheel overlapping to the left-hand side of Hirschi, when Hirschi then had to move rapidly to the left to avoid crashing from Alaphilippe, chopping him. Same thing, domino effect happened to Pogacar, and he lost momentum. And then, Alaphilippe looked like he was cruising to the line. He got a big gap on Hirschi. The cameras even were focusing on him mainly. And then Stephen Bradbury, look that up. Primoz Roglic on the inside, a magical gap opens up where Alaphilippe had just been before he moved off his line. Roglic keeps sprinting and keeps going. Alaphilippe posts up for the celebration 15 meters from the line, maybe 20 meters from the line, and fully stops pedaling. And Roglic ducks in on his inside. Alaphilippe's got his arms outstretched, and Roglic beats him on the line pretty easily. I'm pretty sure Alaphilippe knew. And this is one of the best moments, best finishing photos. This will go down in history, Benji. But what did you see in that sprint, particularly from Hirschi and Pogacar, and then what happened afterwards as well in the commissaire's room?
So we saw in the sprint, obviously, that Alaphilippe was straight up deviating from his line, cutting into Hirschi. And that should not be done. That's obvious. We've spoken about it way too much on this podcast to our liking, about deviating from lines, endangering others in the process. We had it with, Bennett at the start of the Tour de France. He did not get a punishment for that. We had Sagan in the middle of the Tour de France doing similar stuff. We have Alaphilippe doing it today. It sucks to talk about because it stays the same. They keep on doing it, and I don't know why. And the weirdest part is, with 500 meters to go, I saw that Alaphilippe was already, making an odd move. He was almost crashing out of nowhere, straight into Hirschi, so he was just about to save him. And if that save wasn't there, if he did not have the technique to do that, he would have basically crashed that sprint already. So, he was doing some odd stuff in the last kilometer, and in the last kilometer with that sprint, I don't like it. And it seems like the UCI Commission didn't like it either, because I think Hirschi complained and Pogacar after the race. I recall that being heard, making an official complaint. So they obviously wanted a spot higher because they deserve it, to be honest. They would have probably gotten over Alaphilippe anyway because he was losing speed. And he probably knew that, because otherwise he wouldn't make a move like that. You're in a position where you think you're going to lose, and because of that you try and block the others. But that should not be done in a sprint. And he was relegated. That is the normal punishment for this. In the rules, that is the actual punishment that the UCI should give in a case like this. And I think if it made up with a crash, or if Hirschi would crash or Pogacar would crash, then it would have been a full DQ. But relegation, that means that you're being set to the last in the group, and sometimes you get points penalties or something, but in one day race, that's obviously not the case. So Alaphilippe is fifth on the stage. That means that everybody else moves up, meaning Hirschi comes into second, and Pogacar comes into third, Mohoric into fourth, and Alaphilippe finally in fifth.
When you saw it live, Benji, this was not one of those ones where me and you and maybe Lanterne Rouge sit back and we're like, technically that should be a DQ or a relegation. We think that should be a relegation, but it won't. When you saw it live, what percentage chance do you think that he was going to be relegated?
100%. I had 100% confidence that UCI would not make a mistake on this one, because, it's obvious that he ruined the final, straight up ruined it, because you never know whether Roglic would actually win if these other two stay upright. Hirschi was coming with a magical speed. Now, I don't want to say that in taking away something from Roglic's victory. He was strong today. And I feel like we should still cherish him as the winner, because there's probably going to be people that are saying, well, Roglic doesn't deserve it because blah, blah, blah. But Roglic didn't do this. Roglic is not at fault here. He just won the race. And Alaphilippe's the one that spoiled the party for Hirschi and Pogacar. So, yeah, at the moment of it happening, I was like, this is DQ, as in relegation, because I say DQ all the time, but usually I mean relegation by that, even though it's totally different. Yeah, I thought it would be a relegation. You probably as well.
Yeah, I mean, Benji, you might want to go get yourself a little AeroPress. I don't know how you like to make your coffee. I don't even know what time it is in Europe, whether you drink coffee after midday, because I'm about to go off. I just saw De Koning Quickstep released a statement from Alaphilippe saying, I made a mistake for which I take full responsibility. I am aware that my swerve caused a problem to the other riders, and I apologise for that. But I want to underline that I didn't do it on purpose. And that's just a straight up lie. Like, this was a complete piece of shit move from Alaphilippe. He, watch it in slow motion, watch the overhead. He's on the right-hand barriers. He looks over his left shoulder. He sees Hirschi coming and coming quickly. He knows there's a big distance to the line, and he throws his bike to the left-hand side. There is zero chance he didn't do this on purpose. What, his bike just randomly threw itself to the left in the way of Hirschi the second after he looked over his shoulder and saw that Hirschi was coming? Like, get out of here. Like, it's pretty bad that he's not even taking proper responsibility for this, because, yeah, I know he's kind of thrashes about all the time, like in the Tour de France, I was saying all the time, people saying you're an Alaphilippe hater, you're a hater, you're always criticising him. Well, he is this sort of guy, and I see him do these sort of things where it's not been a big deal, and he's kind of chopped people for like the sprint for sixth in a bunch sprint or whatever, in a reduced bunch sprint, and no one really notices or cares in the sprint for sixth. Happened in the Tour de France, he like sprinted into Sturven and bumped him. He came like way off from the left-hand side, completely out of control. No one really cared about it except me, and people saying, oh, you're always criticising him. Hey, I didn't have a word of criticism for him when he won the World Champs at Imola. Magic race from him, perfect race, had his head down, focused. Today, he was just a liability. Like Benji mentioned, that with 600 meters to go, he like nearly did what Miguel Angel Lopez did in the ITT. He like veered his bike really savagely or suddenly because he lost control of his front wheel or something. And then just a straight up dirty move in the sprint. Like, this is, in my view, just as bad as what Dylan Groenewegen did in terms of intent. Like, the intent here is more clear to me just because of how he's looked over his shoulder, and it's so obvious that he's looked over his shoulder, and then that causes him to chop Hirschi really suddenly. And Hirschi like had to take really quick evasive action as well, whereas like he had no chance of avoiding it at all, and that was his sprint over. He had to unclip. So yeah, the intent here was clear to me. I can't believe he's trying to say that he didn't intend to do this. It's a bit of a joke, to be honest, and he's already embarrassed or not done a good job by the Rainbow Bands in his first race. He's kind of let them down, to be honest, and then to not fully own up to it is a big shame. Unless he's saying, I'm a professional rider and I literally cannot sprint in a straight line. And it was just a coincidence. I was looking over my left shoulder at the time. Maybe it's that. But the best thing as well is the instant karma. Like, this is going to go viral on Reddit, I reckon. Like, big viral, because he's fully posting up, puffing his chest out. And Roglic keeps sprinting and beats him on the line. It's so good. It's instant karma, and I think this is going to be almost as big a story as the World Championships win, because it's just, it's so embarrassing for him. But yeah, I want to also say I'm really, really happy for Primož Roglic. I couldn't be more happy for him. It shows a lot of mental fortitude to have both the disappointment. Like, some people might never come back from what happened at the Tour de France. Like, they'd go into a spiral after that. Then he had the World Champs, where he had the whole of Belgium bang for his blood. And he's come back and he's won a monument, Liege Bastogne Liege, from a reduced bunch of absolute hitters. His first monument. yeah, exactly. His first monument, probably the biggest one-day race he's ever won by a long shot. Just a great win for Primoz Roglic. That being said, I don't want to take away. I am so happy genuinely for Roglic. Great to see a smile on his face. That being said, I thought Hirschi was going to win. He was coming pretty quick and to the left-hand side of Alaphilippe. And maybe, I don't know, maybe Pogacar could have got ahead of Hirschi, but to me it looked like Hirschi was going to win. And for him to have that monument, the opportunity to really, truly contest that monument, for that monument victory as a young rider, having that taken away from him is a real shame. And I'm really, feel really bad for Hirschi because you never know what can happen in a career. You know, it looks like he's going to win. He could win every race in the Ardennes for the next 5 years, but you never know what could happen. So it's a shame when opportunities like this are taken away. And the same for Pogacar as well. He had the opportunity to contest this sprint properly taken away, and he was pretty cranky at the finish. But yet, in the end, Roglic first, Hirschi second, Pogacar third, Mohoric fourth. 3 Slovenians in the top 4, pretty wild. Alaphilippe relegated to 5th, should have been DQ'd in my opinion. Mathieu van der Poel 6th, Wood 7th, Tej Benoot 8th, Warren Barguil 9th, pretty good result for him actually, Mikhail Kwiatkowski 10th, Martin 11th, Dumoulin 12th. Have I been too harsh on Alaphilippe there, Benji? Is there any benefit of the doubt in your mind about the intention?
No, as in he wanted to move to the middle to block the people behind him. And I think that's what you're referring to in intention. I don't mean it in the sense that he wanted to make the others crash, because even with Groenewegen, that was not the case. Some people see it like that, but I feel like still these are people that are in the moment, and it's a huge mistake. And yeah, I'm glad he got relegated for it. And I 100% agree with what you said in total. But I also want to lower our gear a bit, because sometimes in the initial day after something like this, we start crucifying the person that does it. I want to look back at the Groenewegen days because I made that mistake myself. While it's obviously a huge mistake, he didn't mean to assassinate Hirschi here, even though it could have accidentally have happened. Now, I have some other topics, because let's dive out of that topic. But first of all, I would like to ask you your opinion.
Oh, hold on.
This. Okay, you first.
Everyone in the YouTube comments, I'm sure you don't need a second invitation, or hit us up with hashtag LRCP. Do you agree with us or not? Maybe this is one of those ones where where my hot take is actually on point. But yeah, let us know if you think I've been too harsh, or and Alaphilippe, there's some sort of explanation and he didn't really mean for this to happen. But yeah, sorry to cut you off, Benji. Go on.
No worries, you were correct. I was just about to say something similar, but have some bad news. We have Greg van Avermaet, the guy that crashed today. He has severed shoulder ligaments, so it's going to be close to make it for the classics. He hopes that he can get there, but it's quite troublesome. He didn't break any bones, so no fractures. So I guess that's the positive of that news, even though it's not that positive. So yeah, you said he was washed before, so we might not even see it this year, whether he's washed or not. I disagree with you on that, but yeah, we had a bit of an opinion on that. We'll talk about that on the classics, if he hopefully can get there. But did we miss anything more regarding LBL and or the Giro, you think?
I'm not sure. I don't think so. That's about it. Obviously, sometimes, we come in with the hot takes, but I think we're on point here. Like, he got relegated. That's what should have happened. Luckily, Hirschi or no one went down. It's a real shame about Greg van Avermaet. I'm not sure I said he was washed. Did I use those exact words? It does sound like me to say something like that. So, I'll have to cop that on the chin, I guess, if he ever wins a big classic again. I think Michael Valgren crashed as well today. I saw him in a bit of difficulty. For the classics. That's your words, not mine. Now onto the women's Liege Bastogne Liege, 135 kilometres long, a very similar finale to the men's race, actually. Côte de la Redoute, 2Ks at 8.5%, 105 Ks in, and the Côte de la Roche au Faucon, 1.3 Ks at 10%, just before the finale, about 14 Ks out, and then exactly the same descent into the finish as well. The contenders for the stage, or for the race rather, the names you all expect. Vos, Van Vleuten, Van der Breggen, Van Dijk, Diagnan, Longoborghini, Doma, Liana Lippert, I think, as well. So they were all the riders we expected. Maybe Amy Peters as well, if Van der Breggen didn't have a good day for Bulls Dorman. Or Hannah Barnes was looking good, or Marlon Russa, the time trialist for Equipe Polkar, or Demi Vollering, who'd looked really, really strong at Flèche Wallonne, actually the only one that really attacked Van der Breggen. But I think there was live coverage for quite a lot of this race, which is really good to see. I'm glad that in Flèche and Liege Women's this year, there was much better live coverage than in previous years.
When I caught on to the race, I think it only just started like a good 15 minutes, but I noticed that Lizzie Deignan was alone up front, and what happened was we had a group that was able to get away because it had some figures in there that are in the teams of the favorites of today. So as the favorites, like you said, Van der Breggen was up there. We also had the likes of maybe Liana Lippert, Floortje Mackay, and Longo Borghini on that list. And also Ashley Moman-Pasio, for example. Maybe a Paladin who also did well in this race last year, I think. So those people all had someone up front in a group of a good 9 riders with the likes of Lizzie Deignan, Grace Brown, Van Dijk, Marianne Vos, Amy Peters, Hannah Barnes, Reuser, Juliette Labou, and Katrien Allerud. Now, from that group, as we said earlier, Marianne Vos in the group for the same team as Molman and Paladin. We had Deignan in there as well. That is in the team of Longo Borghini, Ellen Van Dijk as well. So these people have riders up front, so they don't need to start chasing it. And the only rider that didn't have someone up front was basically, I think, Cecilie Uttrup Ludwig, because even the likes of Nieuwe Doma had someone up front with Labou. So, no, with, who is it? I'm wrong. Nieuwe Doma, with Hannah Barnes, obviously. So everybody had someone up there, and even Movistar was up there with someone. So it was pretty clear that the peloton behind did not need to chase except for the likes of Groupama, and Groupama never really did that. I don't think Ludwig even tried to cover that gap and cover the people that started attacking. So I think she missed out, and that team missed out on that group. So from that point onwards, it was clear that the front group was most likely going to take the stage. They had a solid gap of like 2-3 minutes, and the peloton wasn't really chasing since they had everybody up there. Even Liana Lippert and so forth had someone up front with Juliette Labou. So the front group was trying to make it. And when we caught up, Lizzie Deignan a good minute 20 ahead of that group of 8 that was behind. So I was like 17 to 20 kilometers. Lizzie Deignan up front alone. Can she make it? And I was thinking that she could actually make it, but slowly but surely the gap started going down and going down. And we had one solid climb to go, Rochefort-Faucon, when the people in that 8-man group started lighting it up. I think Grace Brown was the first to attack, right?
Yeah, Grace Brown realised that group wasn't really making any inroads. Voss certainly wasn't really able to bring it back, and there was no Van der Breggen there either. So, or Van Vleuten, I don't think they weren't pulling as Amy Peters for Bulls Dolmans. So, yeah, Grace Brown, good time trialist. We mentioned her a couple of times on the podcast from Michelin Scott, the Australian rider. She started, I think she put like 30 seconds into Deignan on like the first climb straight after her attack, taking it from like a minute into 30, that gap. The chase from the Voss group was, it was being hampered by Ellen Van Dijk, the Trek rider, obviously trying to hamper the chase back to her Trek teammate. Deignan, we obviously saw Deignan was really strong in a break at, I think, Plouay in Europe, on that European Champs weekend when she was in a break with her compatriot Lizzie Banks on Equipe Polkar. They worked really well together, and then Deignan took the win. She was super strong in that breakaway, and no one even got near them. It looked like a foregone conclusion, actually, when that break had stopped working behind the first chase group, behind Deignan. But then Brown made this race really interesting. She got it to 30 seconds, and it was like 10 Ks remaining, I think, and then eked it down to like 18 seconds, particularly when Deignan went the wrong way around a roundabout and then lost like literally 5 or 6 seconds. When you saw Brown 20 seconds later go through the roundabout, she went straight through on the left-hand side and went way quicker. Deignan almost had to brake and come to a halt in the roundabout. But then, unfortunately for Brown, there was the descent. So yes, there was like 4Ks left and she had a gap of 12 seconds. But so she'd eaten into it by another 18 seconds in 6Ks, I think. But then the descent, they were pretty much equal. I'm not sure she gained any time, actually. She might have even lost a second or two on Diagnan, who seemed pretty smooth and efficient on that descent, getting in good position, and didn't really make any mistakes there that I saw. And then after the descent, you got like 1,500 meters to the finish, and you're pretty much going straight under the Flamme Rouge with like Diagnan had a 10-second gap. So 10 seconds in a K is pretty hard to bring back, especially when you've been on your own for the best part of half an hour or more for Grace Brown. But I thought she was going to bring her back with about 6Ks to go, and then when the gap held stable at the top of that descent, and it was like 12 seconds, it looked increasingly unlikely, and she wasn't really moving any extra seconds into it, Grace Brown. Lizzie Deigner wins by 10 seconds over Grace Brown in women's Liege Bastogne Liege. A fantastic win from Lizzie Deigner. This season she's won La Course, 4th in Flèche, 6th in World Champs Road Race, 1st in GP Plouay that I already mentioned. She got 2nd and 3rd in a stage in Giro Rosa, and she was part of the winning Trek team in the team time trial. So consistent. Makes me think, actually, if she was on the Dutch team and traded places with someone, would it make that much of a difference, and would she be winning even more races? Should we be talking about Lizzie Deignan in the same breath as Van der Breggen and Van Vleuten? Probably not, given what those other two have achieved. Van Vleuten primarily last year and earlier this year, and Van der Breggen in the last month and a half. But still, Deignan looks like the 3rd best rider in the world, clearly to the 4th, whoever the 4th might be. We haven't decided. We don't have our list right here. But fantastic from Deignan. Brown 2nd, probably the best one-day result of her career. Van Dijk 3rd, Vos 4th, Peters 5th, so Dutch 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Hannah Barnes-O'Canion 6th. They were 2 minutes back, by the way. That Ellen Van Dijk group led group. So Trek 1st and 3rd, by the way. And Marlon Russe 7th, Juliette Labou 8th, Katrine Allerud 9th, the Norwegian from Movistar, and then Lippert was in like a 3rd or 4th group. She led them over the line for 10th, following 11th. So, pretty interesting race, given that, especially when they reel you back in, Benji, because did you think the race was over when Deignan had a minute 20 and they were all looking at each other, and then did you think Brown could actually bring her back at any point?
I never really thought she would get caught. The 8 women behind her didn't really seem like they were cooperating too well, and it wasn't until Rochefoucauld where Grace Brown made that move that I had hope for that group anymore, because that attack by Grace Brown really hit into that gap quite easily, and that went straight to 30 seconds. And normally it hit 30 seconds, this could still happen, but I kept in my mind that we still had that downhill section that Fuglsang almost crashed in last year to come after Rochefoucauld, so I was still doubting that a 30-second gap was pretty hard to come by, but she came very close, and honestly, hands down, best race of her career, best result of her career, I think, so well done by Grace Brown. And she came a bit too short, so she might think again tonight, where could I have gained that time? But instead, she should honestly be proud of it.
Reel us back in. I thought she was going to bring her back, and I would admit, I did put my Australian hat on for a second, and I was cheering for Grace Brown. But still, a great result. As you said, what a monster day of racing once again. And if you made it that far, you've been listening to a lot of cycling in the last week or so from us. We've been trying to keep you up to date with pretty much every major race. I hope we're doing a good job. If you do appreciate the content, make sure to give us a review or a rating on Apple Podcasts. It really does make a big difference and help us out a lot. That's all we ask from you, I guess. And obviously, if you want to check out Lecole, our show partner for the Giro d'Italia, www.lecole.cc, because this Lanterne Rouge cycling podcast for the Giro Stage 2, Liege Men and Women, Ulissi taking the W, Alaphilippe disgracing himself, and Lizzie Deignan remaining a dominant force in the women's scene. Thanks for listening as always. Ciao.